Now that I'm ill and my body has been a prison for some time, I sometimes live in that infinity in the morning when I lie in bed. I have a black hole in front of me, and the awareness of that black hole sucks me in. I step out of my body and seek that infinitely black path out of my head, and I don't want to turn back. No thought accompanies me, just an inner desire to stay there. That path goes out of me, but it does not come back. Maybe it's like the Milky Way. That's a state I cannot describe. It's nothing. A different mode of being. There's no sadness. I don't know how I get back. Returning from that experience is like stepping off a carousel. I'm all shaken up, as if nothing had happened. State of colorful confusion, not an experience that lasts. It does not last. It is not pleasant or unpleasant. It's not nice or not nice. I was inspired to say something about infinity by this beautiful Polish documentary film I saw about Russian astronauts talking about their travels in outer space. Which they were kind of forced to do, or maybe they decided just to go all by themselves. But we know how it is. What a tough job that is, and for various reasons. Getting all prepared for a trip to go to outer space. One of them talked about seeing the Earth, and it was so small that he could pick it up with 2 fingers. And his family was down there, and of course he missed his family. But he thought that in fact he wanted to just drift away from his space station and see what was out there, beyond it. The black void, the expanse, some kind of unfathomable reality. Although something attracted him, the longing and the desire to return was just as powerful as the desire to leave it all behind and submit to the infinite.
Ja ten film widziałem już dawno, ale wracam do niego myślami, bo te wypowiedzi tych astronautów rosyjskich są przejmujące właśnie, pokazujące, jak bardzo oni są wrażliwi, mimo tego, jak bardzo zależni od systemu, który tam, wiadomo, już od dekad czy więcej ich zniewala.
Infinity makes me think about my dad and the anxiety I felt about infinity ever since I was small, because I inherited just about everything from my father. My looks, my personality, plenty of other things. And I also inherited a climate anxiety and a fear of infinity. When I was maybe 5 years old, my dad read to me about astronomy and astrophysics, and that was terrifying. I mean, he spoke of infinity, and he was so fascinated. He showed me stars, and then I couldn't sleep, and I thought how awful it was, how infinite it was, and it never ends. And seriously, those were endless nights. A child might be able to explain it to me because, I don't know, it's beyond my imagining. My head's too small for concepts like that. Then Hania starts running away from the moon. She said that the moon was chasing her when we talked about those kinds of subjects. She ran through all the courtyards, turning around to see if the moon was still after her. My dad never could stand me. He looked at me and said, "What a tragedy. Shakespeare himself could not have thought this one up." Infinity, it's one of two fears my dad infected me with. Dad wasn't afraid of infinity. Dad had climate anxiety and was absolutely fascinated by infinity. Unfortunately, out of that fascination that he tried to instill in me when I was 5 years old came my fear, because I wasn't ready for it, to grasp it with my mind. I never had, what do you call it, like a fourth dimension. I thought everything could be contained in logic, but with infinity, you can't do it. That was so terrifying, it stayed with me forever. I look at the stars and I think, oh Lord, not that infinity again. That didn't simplify anything, because he was a wonderful and very complicated person. And he spoke of it with an absolute fascination. And when he began juggling those phrases around and got so fascinated, I couldn't keep up with him. I just got a glimpse of what he had in his head. And when he read me the basics of astrophysics, well, for a little girl, that can be really awful. All those great philosophers, they don't know a thing. Those great philosophers with their opinions on infinity, or if the world will end and everything will vanish, etc. It's like when the priest says, you're going to live eternally, but he just doesn't know. This picture speaks, for example, about mathematical formula and infinity. Stencils and infinity.
A gdzie to widzi? Bo szablony to widzimy mniej więcej, a gdzie ta nieskończoność? Tych linii, co? Które gdzieś...
Those lines intersect somewhere in the infinite. Infinity has terrified me ever since I was a child. The older I get, the more I think about it. When I was a child, I was scared we were plunged in an unknowable reality that's infinite.
Rzeczywistości, która jest nieskończona, która wydawała mi się wtedy też właśnie nieskończona, ale też...
It seemed infinite to me then, but it was there by chance. Maybe by chance, it could also be that nothing exists, and I was terrified by this sensation, because it kept coming back, and it was something I wished would go away.
Zjawiskiem, które wolałem, żeby znikło.
Eternity is a kind of infinity. What did he say? Eternity is a kind of infinity. Infinity has no spirit. There's the existence of matter and maybe rational creatures, but inanimate objects can be infinite. And eternity, in the religious sense, if you'll pardon the expression, just means a person will live forever. It's about living people. I ask myself, is the universe or the world the present matter and antimatter that creates all this? Will it all keep existing, or will it end at some point? And if it ends, then what comes next? That was my question about eternity.
Które mi się właśnie kojarzy, dotyczy wieczności, czy też niewieczności.
I wrote a poem about eternity. It's about yellow leaves. What do you want to remind me of yellow leaves? Of the passing of time? Of eternity? There is no mathematical formula. It's a collection of prime numbers unto infinity. It's from mathematics, but these are not living creatures. And eternity is about life that's supposed to last infinitely. After that, I asked two questions. Is that universe a particle of something?
Po prostu drobinką jakąś trwania tego wszechświatu. Co w ogóle, no tak.
And secondly, is the answer to that question owing to the lack of an answer to the question friendship and love? Those are questions that have no answers. Oh, I really like that. Well, all right. I wondered, infinity and eternity. That takes us right to the limits. How long will we live? We'll live for as long as we live, but after dying, we'll live for as long as people remember us. I don't know if it's mathematically true, but infinity is relative. Because there are butterflies that live for just one day, and for them, a human life is an inconceivable infinity. We can't conceive of a life of a planet or a sun. I can't imagine time like that. I don't even know if it exists. I don't know if something like billions of years exists. 4 billion. Beyond my experience. When I was younger, I basically thought I would live for eternity. And with age, well, yeah, some people have a hard time coming to terms with it. Well, in mathematics, they say plus or minus infinity. Well,
Coś tam jest, coś tam... Plus, minus, nieskończoność, no. Coś tam, jakieś coś tam
Ale
jest, no.
sobie to chcesz czasami
I wonder what
Tak, no, zastanawiam się,
math and
co
infinity
to
have in
jest
common.
matematyka z nieskończonością.
And moreover,
I doszłaś do...
Plus, minus,
plus,
dodatku,
minus,
minus, no.
Ale
it's
doszłaś
empty.
do jakichś wniosków?
Nie, pusto.
I flunked mathematics, unfortunately. It had no beginning, and there's no boundaries, not on one side nor on the other. It's just we put those boundaries there.
Help! Help! Where'd you get that infinity? There's no such thing. Seriously, infinity. It appears to me with that movement, that figure eight, that Mobius strip. It turns like this. You know, eternal movement.
Stencils and infinity. They shatter and they collapse. They collapse into themselves, and they're born. That's how I imagine it, kind of multi-dimensionally. I mean, they're born and then they fall apart.
Inflacja, później się zapadają w sobie do czarnej dziury. Nie wiem, tak jakoś, że to jest taki proces wybuchu i później...
It's the process of a super heavy body exploding and then contracting and exploding again. That's how they are. I don't know. That's how I imagine it.
Tak sobie to wyobrażam.
But, you know, it doesn't scare me.
To nie napawa.
Stencils and infinity.
Jako dziecko kiedyś nieświadomie, to była chyba druga klasa podstawówki, mieliśmy ulepić amulet, bo mieliśmy taką fajną wychowawczynię, która puszczała właśnie Wodetkę Dance albo Vangelis i słuchaliśmy, świece się paliły i później medytowaliśmy i rysowaliśmy coś tam, albo mieliśmy ulepić. No to ja
As a child, I once unconsciously made a snake eating its own tail, even though I didn't know that symbol yet. I just did it unconsciously. My teacher was surprised and asked how I knew about that. the Ouroboros is a symbol of infinity. The renewed cycle of being. I don't know. Subconsciously, those archetypes are just built into our minds in advance. It's just we have these blockages that keep us from knowing the whole world. We got lots of blockages set up. Some get unblocked, others don't. Once there was a climber and a painter who spoke about infinity. He had just painted pictures of granite rocks, and these enormous rocks. These were abstract pictures. They were just like splashes of paint. He talked about his relationship with climbing, and he had this close connection with the mountain through touch and smell. They were like a single body for just one moment.
Dotyku, zapachu, bycia jakby w pewnym momencie wręcz jednym ciałem. Jak on opowiadał to na tle tych swoich obrazów, to też tak poczułam, że...
And he was the only one who explained what drives people to hike those dangerous trails, up those peaks. That sense of being united with something greater. You know, a sense of harmony, of beauty.
Pojednania z czymś większym i jakiejś takiej harmonii, jakiegoś piękna.
The self just disappears. There's an infinity. There's no self. There's just, I don't know, some kind of space.
Doświadczenie jakby wchodzenia na skałę, bycia z nią, to właściwie takie doświadczenie połączenia, takiego stopienia się wręcz ze skałą, jakiegoś takiego bardzo intymnego, pięknej relacji, która jest jakaś bardzo mocno tak wspierająca i jakby zapraszająca, także...
It's like, it supports you, it calls you, you can't compare it with anything.
Życie potoczyło, że przestał móc
And that guy, he had to stop climbing. He couldn't live without it. So he began painting. That took him there, in a way. On the last day, we were meant to set off, and there was still this ascent to a 4,000er. I mean, you had to pay a lot.
A nie można już było wejść. Z tych 3000 na 4 nie można było wejść, bo tam już było to dla alpinistów, nie? Czyli nie można tam sobie było pochodzić już tak. Powiedzmy się zapłacić za to, no tu byliśmy na 3, tu na 4. No ale dobra, obudziłam się rano i tak sobie myślę, ale może nie przyjadę już nigdy tu, nie?
In the morning, my husband said, but we may never be back here, so we should just go. Right then and there, and on that cable car. So we went from 3,000 to 4,000 meters. I've never had a moment like that. There were cliffs there, a sheet of ice in the middle of the summer. And it was like an abyss, so much space. And the feelings that arose made me think, maybe I wanted to stay there. I thought, what am I saying? I have a job, I have a family. But if those cliffs were to crumble, I'd want to stay there. I had no fear of that ice-covered space. It seemed to me infinity was a marvelous place.
Wydawało mi się to właśnie taka nieskończoność i takie cudowne miejsce, nie? Jakieś zupełnie absolutne, takie, jak to się nazywa?
My daughter, who studies philosophy and psychology, said that this was a normal sensation. This longing to stay in an abyss. I mean, I can't describe it, but I only had that experience one time in my life.
No ja przynajmniej zupełnie się tego nie bałam. Jeszcze dodam, że ja mam z grubsza lęk wysokości. Czyli na takiej zasadzie, że wiecie, niby chodziłam po górach, bo zawsze uważam, że warto chodzić, ale z balkonu już tak z 3. piętra jak wyglądam, to mi się w głowie kręci, nie? Więc to jest w ogóle niesamowite, że ja mając takie uczucie tego lęku wysokości, byłam w stanie nie bać się tego, a wręcz chęć zostania w ogóle jakiś taki.
So I remember I had this experience in the Bieszczady once. It was 2001, I think, and I went there with a broken heart. I was in Bieszczady a few times after that, but it never affected me quite the same way again. I felt like I was in a gigantic ocean with these very high, rippling mountains. And that was absolutely a sense of infinity. Something in me hurt, but it wasn't a bad pain. And I kept on just pressing forward. I only had that feeling once, but it was for my entire stay there. When I traveled to the sea, to the Hell Peninsula, I sat at the very end of the promontory, and it was just the sea all around me, and I felt so tiny, like I was hovering over the sand. And I thought, why are you worried, Hania? You're just a grain of sand, just a trifle. There's no point in taking everything so seriously.
I też mnie to jakoś tak, ale to ściągało moje myśli, bo no nie wiem, jakoś jednocześnie byłam zafascynowana. Natomiast teraz jakoś już nie. Może trochę więcej się dowiedziałam na ten temat. Lubię oglądać różne dokumenty, takie też fizyczne, znaczy z zakresu fizyki. I ostatnio się dowiedziałam, że nieskończoność prawdopodobnie nie jest tylko jedna, tylko jest ich wiele i może być większa i mniejsza nieskończoność. I to dopiero mi sprawiło, że trochę mózg mi wybuchł. Ale jakoś właśnie bardziej mnie to teraz fascynuje niż napawa lękiem.
Ja podzielę się takim doświadczeniem moim, słuchajcie, chyba sprzed 2 dni.
So when I load up YouTube, because I adore watching YouTube, and they have all of those colorized films from 1920, 1927 in Warsaw, and that's a slightly different kind of infinity.
I słuchajcie, nieskończoność trochę w innym wydaniu. Ci ludzie,
those people in that beautiful Warsaw, and there's not a scrap of litter on the street. And they did all the same things that we do. I mean, parents took care of their children, lovers strolled hand in hand, people worked, they cleaned, and I suppose they also wondered how they would support their family. So we do all the same things, and in 100 years, regardless of how people might be living, whether we're flying around in rocket ships or not, that down-to-earth love, those parental feelings, will be there with us. And I was thinking about infinity in that context as I watched that film. I think people have a kind of infinite dimension inside of them. It's like an infinite space right inside of them. And it comes out in various situations, an experience, an encounter, or maybe a color sets it in motion.
Pod wpływem różnych sytuacji objawia, że coś, jakieś doświadczenie, spotkanie, kolor, przeżycie, jakby to uruchamia. Ale też, że można jakby swoją intencją.
But you can also try to go in it intentionally. You know, last year I had a major crisis. It was an internal one, and it was quite rough.
I wtedy jakoś mi po prostu
And I took a journey into my heart.
Do środka swojego serca.
Something invited me there inside.
Coś zapraszało do
And there really is an infinite space in there. I mean, technically speaking, it was a meditative state or experience.
Powiedzmy, że to się, nie wiem, technicznie, że to były jakieś takie medytacyjne stany, czy medytacyjne doświadczenia. Ale tak
But
naprawdę
really, it was a great sense of peace. It was an immersion, a sense of being part of something boundless.
Bycia częścią czegoś niezmierzonego, ale
But
także nie ma
nor were there any
myślenia,
thoughts
że jakby
about
nie ma
what
jakby
was
myślenia,
or
co było,
will
będzie,
be.
co,
There was no fear.
jakiegoś strachu, tak jakby...
It was like an absolute here and now.
No, to takie
That was my experience.
jakby moje własne doświadczenia.
Oczy, jakie było pytanie?
Jaki kolor ma nieskończoność?
Tęczy.
It's grey blue.
No,
I mean, it depends on the weather. Sorry, what was the question? What color is infinite? That's a tough question. I would say it's blue. That's my association. It's charcoal. Infinity, what color is it? It's the kind that... I mean, it has no color. It's an abstract idea. It's transparent because it's pure, right? It has no meaning attached to it. It's transparent infinity. Fear of infinity stayed with me for always. Now it's a part of me. I've been like this since I was tiny. I don't know if I'd prefer not to have it. You know, we can't use logic to grasp infinity. And ever since I was tiny, I took everything seriously. Everything I heard. When I heard about infinity, I tried to rationalize it. Now I just deny it. I put it on a shelf, and I respect it. I don't know. I can only make reference to infinity, but the question is, what comes next? It all ends, and what comes next? Spent all my life exploring something else than inadvertently discovering infinity. Who would tell you if you inadvertently gained that knowledge? If I were to gain that knowledge, I'd feel sorry for everyone who had inadvertently gained that knowledge. You'd feel sorry for people who what? For everyone who inadvertently learned what infinity was. But why? For me, it's a great joy. I think anything can be infinitely complicated, but it should be just reduced to one simple thing. For instance, if we look at a leaf under a microscope, the cells, and we go into the parts of those cells and further down, deeper and deeper into new worlds and multiply. And that leads to...
Zupełnie nie wiem. Zupełnie nie wiem.
Bo to tak
Ja
by...
tylko mogę nawiązać do nieskończoności, ale jest pytanie, co dalej? No gdzieś to, no powiedzmy, się kończy. I co dalej?
No ale ten temat jest bardzo dobry. Co dalej?
What next? You can't read everything. I think it's better to be a person who's not well read, but whose eyesight is in good shape. After all, if your eyesight is good, you can observe nature. You can observe the world of animals. You need your hearing for that too.
No i słuch przy tym też jest ważny.
Thank you.